Hello, my name is Willie Wisely, and welcome to Watercolor Editions, a music podcast that takes you deep inside my series of new acoustic singles, celebrating 40 years of being a songwriter. Recording new solo versions of my songs has brought memories flooding back as to what inspired each one, and I want to share those memories with you as we play the new Watercolor Edition and then the original studio version and chat it all down. So now sit back and let me paint a picture for you. In 1990, I was laying down, plenty bleary, in the back bunk of the Willie Wisely Trio's rock and roll touring van. And we were rolling down Highway 90, 94 near Eau Claire, Wisconsin, I think. And we were on our way to our third or fourth engagement in less than a year at O'Kay's Corral in Madison, Wisconsin. O'Kay's was on almost all of our tour routes because, one, I had a mad crush on the door girl with the pixie haircut. And two, the bartender, covered in tattoos, dyed black hair, haranguing all the customers and telling everyone what the hell they're going to drink that night, had a crush on me. She was cute too. And she spent a lot of time also haranguing the club booker to get us back for return engagements. This situation would not end well for me, but that's its own podcast episode. Let's just leave it at this, that for the time, we were really psyched to have the return engagements. So, we're bumping down the highway. Our drummer Peter was commanding the wheel, driving. He loved driving. His personality made the road groovy in every way. And today he was blasting his latest obsession on cassette, Captain Beefheart's Trout Mask Replica album. And the racket was coming from the boombox, and the boombox leaned against the windshield, and it slid around on that dashboard, untethered, teetering there for almost 5 years as we toured the nation. It was around noon, it was early in the day, and Peter was already deep into side 4 of this cacophony, and he was singing along with what seemed like every word memorized to the song Orange Clawhammer. And it's less of a song and more like Don Van Vliet's Memo to Self. It's line after line of punishing, abstruse lyric and to no musical accompaniment whatsoever. And between each gruff and rumpled phrase, there comes this faint click of a dictaphone turning on and off. It's either a lo-fi masterpiece decades before its time, or maybe it's the ancient rantings of a possessed preacher in an Alan Lomax field recording. Or maybe it's both. I don't know. But honestly, I knew this. Beefheart in the morning was plenty annoying, particularly with Peter singing along or yelling along. And the din of our 1980 tin can road machine was loud enough already, right? Me bouncing around in the back. But in the cascade of these crazed lyrics, there dropped a line that pierced everything for me. And my rain can caught me a cup of water. Now, many songs are born of a singular inspirational moment like this. But for Raincan, this was only the first drop in a long winding river of what would take this song to its finish. Each of 4 verses and the chorus itself were birthed from different experiences in my life at that time. And impossibly, they string together and make some sense. Fast forward a few months. I'm visiting my father on his sailboat in Sausalito Harbor. And there's fetid water congealed around all the docks. And I asked my dad, where is that coming from? And he says, well, it's all these people live on their boats and they're all pumping their bilges out into the harbor. And it's basically the effluence of man, all this brown foam, oily rainbows skimming off the sludge water. Ugh. So the next morning, I walked up the hill behind my dad's house, and there was a view up there of the entire San Francisco Bay. I had my guitar in hand, and I found some shade under a low, sprawling California oak, and it was there that I married Beefheart's lyric to my basic distress for Mother Nature and all that pollution I saw. And I wrote, so I bought myself a rain can. I prayed for water. My rain can caught a cup of bilge and water. So I had a chorus, and now I had verse 1. It was me walking up a hill and bemoaning the pollution in the bay. And for verse 2 and 3, it occurred to me that recent experiences in Minneapolis earlier in the summer might be the best lyrical grist I have. The first experience, I'd been riding my bike south of downtown. I was shirtless, I was in breezy shorts, and I was coming home from a night at my girlfriend's house when a couple of kids jumped out from the bushes and slugged me right in the face as I pedaled by. Given what I was wearing, or rather what I wasn't, I may have deserved this, but my nose hurt like hell, and my front teeth were loose, and my mouth tasted of blood. And while these kids were doing their little nanny poo-poo routine, begging me to come out and fight them, I grabbed my sunglasses they'd knocked to the pavement and fled. I was totally freaked out. And I think it was only 3 weeks later, I was again riding my bike, and I was headed home down Hennepin Avenue over what would become the 29th Street Greenway. And it was around bar time, and this low-riding car with impenetrably dark windows and glinting custom mag hubcaps pulls up beside me and is ominously keeping pace. So I'm walled in between this car on my left and a row of parked cars on my right, and I was getting really nervous. And it took a minute before the power window of this car slowly opened, and dropping from the shadows came a handgun pointed right at my head. And the moment unfolded in an eternity and also in an instant. And when it happened, silently, without the proverbial bang, the trigger was pulled, and I felt a wetness, blood, my lips tasteless, water. And they sped away, yelling out the window, "No whiteys on my turf!" Though that was less a near-death experience and more a near bath, I was shaken to the core, and I pulled up onto the curb and just sat there and cried on the busy sidewalk. My bike tipped over in front of me. So the song now seemed complete, and I set it to chords that I pictured Neil Young banging out, and I pictured a frenzied guitar solo with Crazy Horse raging in the background, these dramatic verses and the allegorical chorus. And I took it down from Sausalito Mountaintop, and I flew it back home to Minneapolis, taught it to the band, and played it at a show on December 10th, 1990, in the main room at First Avenue. We were opening up for Aztec Camera. After the show, memorably, I was buttonholed by a club manager in the upstairs office. I was up there to get paid. He was sort of my epic frenemy, Tim Kennedy, and he always seemed to enjoy my band, but couldn't quite frame his comments in a positive way. And though I was up in the office to get paid for the gig, or I'm sorry, rather underpaid for the gig, Tim unwittingly gave me this great gift in the form of his remark. "Hey, I like that song Raincan, but you shouldn't sing political songs. You're just a pretty face." And with that, I had Raincan's epilogue fourth verse. And here it is for your listening pleasure, the watercolor edition of Raincan. Paint a picture for us, Willie.
I wander up a hill to see the city by the bay. It fills with bilge and all the sewage of one day. I'm blown away. So I bought myself a rain can. I prayed for water. I ride my bike through town for years and never feared until they knocked me down. They stole my shit and kicked my face. I am amazed. So I bought myself a rain can. I prayed for water. My rain can caught a cup of Belgian water. Whoa. Whoa. curb. The window rolls as a pistol is exposed. He says no white is all night turf. His pistol squirts. So I bought myself a rain can. I buried for water. My rain can caught a cup of Belgian water. A friend pulls me aside. He said, stop singing about the issues of our day. Everything you've said is just so base. You're just a pretty face. So I bought myself a rain can. I buried for water. My rain can caught a cup of Belgian water. Water. So I bought myself a rain can. I buried for water. My rain can caught a cup of Belgian water. Water. Bought myself a rain can. I prayed for water. Rain, 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 rain.
That was Raincan, Watercolor Editions, the fourth in my year-long series of acoustic singles celebrating 40 years of being a songwriter. And now, Willie's Timeout Corner. When I get to talking about songwriting, I always like to point out something a little technical, something for songwriters or those of you who are intrigued at what technically makes a song tick. So I've started this segment, and it's a timeout because it's so punishingly technical, right? All right, I've sung Raincan at most of the shows I've ever played. It's a fan favorite. I've talked about it to fans for years, but I've never until today have I realized that the chorus has a lame identical rhyme. An identical rhyme is when you rhyme a word with the exact same word. Rhyming June with moon, that's one thing. But rhyming June with June is another. And identical rhymes, they actually do have their place. Like when the same word has different meanings. For example, June is a month and June is a woman's name. But overall, they tend to hit the ear with a kind of a thud, and they're almost universally avoided by songwriters. But Raincan bluntly rhymes water with water. But it actually works. And I really had to sit down and think about this for a minute. I wrote this song 30 years ago. Why has this never occurred to me? And my suspicion is because the phrase emphasis is not on the word water, but on the more unusual and active words that surround it. Words like rain can or bilge, which many people hear as Belgian water, as in chocolate. Or it could also be that there's active verbs around it, like bought and caught, which I'm realizing now are internal rhymes. Those words occur in the middle of two adjacent phrases. And the fact that I'm discovering all this stuff now makes it really pretty clear that so much of songwriting is just instinctual. And though studying it is really fun and learning its rules is a great pastime, a great song really comes mostly from the intuitive side of our brains. The original studio version of Raincan first appeared on my 1992 album of the same name, produced by Ezra Gold, whom I checked back in with for this podcast. And it was great to talk to him. He reminded me that for the Raincan sessions, we were very deliberately graduating the Willie Wisely trio from our 4-track cassette era. Lo-fi, crunchy, recorded direct to, low quality tape. This would be my first full-length studio album, And the intention was to give us a sound that shimmered and that would take advantage of this new thing called the compact disc. Okay, let that sink in for a minute. The sonic clarity of that medium could give the trio an opportunity to distinguish ourselves from what was going on across town in Minneapolis. Grunge was all the rage. We were in the wake of Husker Du and Soul Asylum and a lot of very noisy bands. Twin Tone, the record label, had been home to a lot of this music, and they had a bigger rock sound. I always wanted the trio to be different, and so did Ezra. We both recalled that the band was recorded live at Gark Studios in South Minneapolis, which is east of Hiawatha on 44th. And notably, this is where Trip Shakespeare had recorded their first LP, Applehead Man. Now, we had Peter Anderson on drums, me on guitar, and James Voss on upright bass. Not many bands back then rocked an upright bass unless they were like rockabilly. And it's not often you hear a big rocking sound, like on Raincan, with an upright bass anchoring it. So please, take a moment and appreciate James's amazing parts. The walking runs he does on the out choruses just always thrill me. Now, before the session, we'd played this song live so many times that I believe we tracked the instruments without me singing a guide vocal for everyone to follow. We all knew the song. Then after we got the best take of the band playing, I overdubbed an additional guitar and vocals. The indelible memory of this session was setting me up with a vocal mic and a spit screen on the sidewalk outside of the control room. And that way we'd capture whatever might occur, right? Now, in retrospect, this actually adds nicely to the fatefulness of the lyric. And indeed, right as I start singing the first line, you can plainly hear a city bus roar by. You also might notice my vocals, they sound a bit nasal, and that's because we recorded me singing with the tape deck slowed down, which means when you play the tape back at a normal speed and mix it down, the voice sounds more piercing. It's a trick that the Beatles often used, and it made them sound more bug-like, more Beatley. So with all this in mind, sit back and take a sip out of the Raincan, and don't let the instrumental intro, Raincan number 9, throw you. Raincan was such a crowd pleaser that I wrote a tension-building intro for it, and we'd improvise this to be a little different every night. And sometimes it was short, sometimes long, sometimes loud, sometimes mellow, usually all of the above. So sit back and let Willie, James, Peter, and Greg paint a picture for you. Oh, and the zipper that you hear on Raincan number 9, that's Greg playing his vinyl trombone case. Paint a picture for us, guys.
side. He said, stop singing about the issues of our days. Everything you've said is just so base. You're just a pretty face. So I bought myself a rain can. I prayed for water. My rain can caught a cup of Belgian water. So I bought myself a rain can. I prayed for water. My rain can caught a cup of Belgian water. Water. So I bought myself a rain can. I prayed for water.
That was Raincan from my first full-length release of the same name, released in 1992 on Gark Records. But there's another version of Raincan you gotta hear. Fast forward 5 years to 1997. I'm working with producer John Strawberry Fields on my follow-up album to 1996's She. And John dug Raincan, and he'd actually played it with me live on a tour that I brought him on through Illinois and Missouri the year prior. So he knew there was an earlier version of Raincan, but if we were going to record it, we knew that there would need to be a new sonic approach, one that would fit the palette that we'd established with my She album. So instead of taking a guitar-first approach, John brilliantly first-tracked this chiming piano. Then he brought in drummer Dorian Crozier, and Dorian played hard and simple, very few cymbals and very few crashes. John wanted to produce the drums like Jeff Lynne might have. And then there's this really loud tambourine in the mix, and I think quite possibly that was our click track. I also remember John joking with Dorian through the glass about adding a Prince fat clap onto every song for the upcoming new album that we were building. And he wound up actually doing it on this song. I think it's on the fourth beat of almost every measure. So then after Dorian, John added a Nord synth bass, and you can really hear it. At the end of the song, John hits the lowest note on the keyboard, which isn't really even a tone you can hear. It's just this sizzling at the end. But to my ear, the big hook here is John's guitar arpeggios. And I asked him about these, and he credits those to his XTC obsession at the time. Well, he still has that obsession. Although I must say, a close second in the hookiness department is the backing vocal track. That's Mike Rickberg and Ken Chastain. I had toured a lot with their bands. Mike Rickberg's Rex Daisy and Ken Chastain's Beat the Clock. And those guys actually knew Raincan from just being on the road with me. They got into the vocal booth and sang with such spirit. It really warmed my heart because I was more accustomed to being in the studio with my full seasoned touring band. And this album was being made by me and John, and often just John alone because I was busy renovating a home. So it made me feel good that Turbo Sherbert would wind up having a community feel. In particular, I want to point out when Mike got up for the fourth verse and did a little solo harmony there. He walked into the booth, cocksure, and said, "This song needs some Garfunkel." And out came those beautiful, earnest choir boy harmonies. And then lastly, on this version of Raincan, there are two very obvious samples. One is that epic drum fill in the middle, and that's ripped off from this famous power pop band, who won't be mentioned. And the end orchestra hit, which was, I'll give you a clue here, that was stolen from what might have been your favorite British television show if you were born around 1960. So listen for all this and fill your bucket up with Raincan in this very strawberryous version from my 1997 album, Turbo Sherbert. Paint a picture for us, Willie.
I wander up a hill to see the city by the bay. It fills with bilge and all the sewage of one day. I'm blown away, so I bought myself a rain can. I prayed for water. knocked me down. They stole my shit and kicked my face. I am amazed. So I bought myself a rain can. I prayed for water. My rain can caught a cup of Belgian water. A car pulls up the curb. The window rolls as a pistol is exposed. He says no whitey's on my turf. His pistol squirts. So I bought myself a rain can. I prayed for water. My rain can caught a cup of Belgian water. A friend pulls me aside. He said, stop singing about the issues of our day. Everything you've said is just so base. You're just a pretty face. So I bought myself a rain can. I prayed for water. My rain can caught a cup of Belgian water. So I bought myself a rain can. I prayed for water. My rain can caught a cup of Belgian water. Water. Bought myself a rain can. I prayed
That was Raincan, track 5 from my 1997 album Turbo Sherbet. In preparing for this episode, I called the Willie Wisely Trio's bass player James Voss. He essentially founded the band with me, and I asked him what he remembered most about that time, reminding me that the Raincan tour of 1990 ended in Iowa somewhere, with one of us sleeping in a car trunk with a guy from another band. It's not what you think. Another one of us with a lovely girl back at her dorm. And as ever, one of us in the van guarding the gear all night, and one of us, fittingly, outside, sleeping against a building below a leaking gutter. Raincan indeed. Thanks for that memory, James. Spot on. Well, that's the final stroke for this episode of Watercolor Editions. Big thanks to Dave Pinsky, who signed me to his Gark record label in 1991, and Steven Greenberg to October Records. Both these gentlemen and their staff did so much in service of my music. Be sure to catch other episodes of Watercolor Editions, featuring my songs Flowers for the Lady, Cracked Worldview, or True. There are many more to come, and they drop every other Wednesday until either you or I can't take it no more. But know this, there's about 300 songs to go. And by the way, CDs of the album Raincan and Turbo Sherbet are available at my Bandcamp page, williewisely.bandcamp.com, along with, of course, an array of cassettes, t-shirts, and vinyl. You know what to do. And lastly, hit the subscribe button and don't miss the next episode of Watercolor Editions. We'll put my song Face the Sun up on the easel, a song I wrote in 2017 with John Fields. We wrote it for a client, but then loved it so much we didn't give it to him and kept it for ourselves. We'll paint that watercolor picture, play a new version, play the original studio version, and chat it all down again on Watercolor Editions. I'm Willie Wisely. Thank you for listening.